behind every undeniable brand are strategies most people never see. Until now. Each week, we're ripping open the playbooks of world-class innovators who've built massive communities from scratch. Real people, real results, real systems you can implement today. I'm Kendall LeJeune, and this is Tribe Tracks. Joining us on the show today is Henry Washington. Henry Washington is a real estate investor, entrepreneur, and educator based in Northwest Arkansas. His journey into real estate began after a moment of financial anxiety when he realized that working a 9-to-5 wouldn't provide the financial freedom he sought for his family. Motivated by a desire to create generational wealth, Henry dove headfirst into real estate investing, closing his first deal within just 90 days. Since then, Henry has built a diverse portfolio of over 100 rental properties and continues to flip around 20 houses annually. He is also the co-host of Bigger Pockets on the Market podcast, where he shares his expertise with a broad audience of aspiring investors. A passionate advocate for financial independence, Henry is committed to educating others on building wealth through real estate. Please welcome Henry Washington. So we are joined by the one, the only, the Henry Washington. Super excited to have you on, Henry. How are you today?
Fantastic, man. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I've been so excited about having this conversation with you because you have such an incredible personal brand. And I can't wait to jump into that and hear all of the nuts and bolts about how you are building that, how you've grown that. But let's start, for those who are listening that may not know exactly who you are and what you do. Can you give us a little bit a background about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I am Henry Washington. I am a real estate investor. I've been buying and selling and holding real estate since 2017. I bought my first rental property. And since then, we've just been growing our portfolio. We've got about 130, 120 some odd rental properties, and then we flip 20-ish houses a year, 10 to 20. So we're going to flip more than 20 this year, but that's about the normal for us.
Wow. So very busy real estate investor. You also are one of the hosts on the Bigger Pockets podcast, right?
Yes, correct. Yes.
Henry, your social media presence is incredibly impressive. You have hundreds of thousands of followers across multiple social media platforms. When was it in your real estate journey that you decided to start having some type of presence online?
Oh, man. I started in 2017. Having hundreds of thousands of followers was never the goal. So the story goes, I bought my first property after I had a panic attack. And I had that panic attack because I knew I needed to make a change financially in my life. Up until that point in my life, I had done all the things that society tells you to do and still couldn't really afford the lifestyle that I wanted and my new wife wanted at the time. And I also didn't have any financial education before I started investing in real estate. And I just made poor financial decisions with the money that I did make. And so I went to school, I got good grades, I got a technical degree so that I could make money out of college. I got a good job, I was making good money, I was climbing the corporate ladder. But I would also spend everything that I made. And as a single male, I was comfortable with that. It didn't bother me that I spent all my money. I was always able to just figure out how to make it work. But then I got married and quickly found out that my wife did not want me to do that. So we had to figure out, I had to make a change, right? And I started to notice things like when we applied to buy our first home together, the bank, the lender called me and said, you can't be on the loan. Your credit's so bad. You're going to hurt your wife's chances of home ownership. If you want your wife to be able to buy a home, you can't be on it. And that was just a big shot to like the ego because I was the breadwinner. I wanted to be this provider and I couldn't provide the basic human need of a home. And so it was a big shock. And that was like the first sign that I really needed to make some changes. And then fast forward, my wife did buy that house and she allowed me to live in it with her. So that was very kind of her. And then as we were a young married couple, we started having young married couple conversations like, how many kids do we want to have? And what's our dream home look like? And where do we want to go on cool vacations? Like you dream together and that's supposed to be fun. And I remember just feeling terrified. I remember feeling, I can't afford any of this. I couldn't afford to be in the house that we're in now, nonetheless a dream home. I don't know how to provide you with the life that you deserve.
Mm.
And that led me to a panic attack that night after that conversation. I woke up at 3 a.m, just like panicking, sweating, legit panic attack. Like, I'm not using the term loosely. I was literally having a panic attack. And
Wow.
so I Googled at 3 a.m. how to make extra income. Because in my mind, I was like, if I can get a side hustle or something, make some extra money, that'll help me to be able to afford some of this lifestyle that we want. And we weren't looking for some extravagant lifestyle. We just wanted to do normal people things. And
Right.
and so as I started to read the Google search results, I started to pay attention to words that I didn't normally pay attention to, words like passive income and cash flow. And I was like, all right, what's all this? I was digging into it. And like everything that I would read that touched on those 2 or 3 keywords was all related to real estate. And then I would dig in and I would read these Bigger Pockets articles. And I was like, I found Bigger Pockets and I was, wait, this is just regular people that do this? Like, I didn't know regular people owned a bunch of real estate. Like, I just thought super rich people and like corporations owned real estate. Like, I never had to think about it before. And so now that I was faced with thinking about it, I was like, oh, wait, like regular folks do this? I was like, oh, if all these regular folks can do it, I got to be able to do it too.
Surely I could do it.
I'll figure this out. And so just my ignorance at 3 a.m. told me that, oh, yeah, you'll just figure out how to buy real estate. You have terrible credit and you don't have any money, but your solve for these problems are you're going to buy real estate. And I was at peace with that decision. And I went to sleep, woke up the next morning, told my wife we were going to be real estate investors. And she was like, yeah, okay, whatever. So sounds great. And I know this is a long story, but I'm going to get to the question that you asked. And so that decision at 3 a.m. was the best decision, one of the best decisions I ever made in my life. And because I was like, all right, how do I do this then? And so I was like, I don't know how to do it, but I know there's got to be people around here doing it. And so I found like every real estate meetup I could go to. And I started going to meetups just like crazy, networking, asking people a million questions about how they're doing all this stuff. I started taking on the identity of a real estate investor because that's just something I believe, like the world, that's how the world works. If you want something, then you got to put it out there. That's what you want. Like, you got to become the thing that you want before you're the thing. And the world, the universe, your God will give you the things that thing has. That's how it works.
Yeah.
If you want something, give that thing and you'll receive that thing. That's how the world works. If you want to get punched in the stomach, if you're like, man, I just have this urge for someone to punch me in the stomach. The fastest way for you to get punched in the stomach is to punch somebody else in the stomach, right?
There
Like,
you go.
that's how the world works. And so I just started telling people I was a real estate investor. I didn't know how to become one. I didn't know, but that didn't matter to me. Like, I wanted to be, in my mind, become the thing that I was looking for so that the universe would return those things to me. And by going to these meetups and telling everybody I was an investor, I got my very first deal. A buddy of mine heard that I was buying houses. I hadn't bought one yet, but he just heard that I was buying houses because that's what I was telling folks.
Of course, you're a real estate investor.
Yeah,
you buy
exactly.
houses.
He called me and he was like, dude, are you buying houses? I was like, yeah. He was like, man, I need your help. I got a house that I got to sell. Like, I got to sell it, and I got to sell it in 30 days. And I knew the house. He was my friend. I'd been to his house. And I was like, all right, okay, so what's the story? He was like, look, I moved out of the house about a year ago. I let a guy from my church move into it. He needed some help. He needed a place to stay. He was supposed to be fixing his credit, and he was supposed to be able to buy the house by this time this year, but he hadn't fixed his credit and he can't buy the house. And I got to sell it because I need X amount of dollars from the sale of that property to go buy this other piece of land or home, land with a home for my church. He was very heavily involved in this community church he was in. And he was like, it's on a time crunch. I have to be able to do it. And if you can buy the house and close in 30 days, I'll sell it to you for $116,000. It's worth about $165,000, $170,000. I don't care what it's worth. All I care about is if I sell it for 116, it gives me the exact amount of money I need to go and buy this property in the time frame I need to buy it in. So, like, could you buy the house? And I was like, yeah. And for those who are listening, I was shaking my head no as I was saying yes, because I had no idea how to buy it, but I wasn't going to tell him that I couldn't buy it. Like, it was such a good deal. And so I was like, he was like, all right, what do we do? And I was like, hold on. We were at work. We worked at the same place. And so I went to my desk and I Googled, how do you buy a house without a real estate agent? And it was like, you need to sign a purchase and sale agreement. And I had to Google, what's a purchase and sale agreement? And then I had to Google, how do I find a purchase and sale agreement? And then I downloaded one off the internet and we changed the names on it and I printed it out and we signed it at his desk. And so I put his house under contract at the office without knowing what I was doing. And that's terrible legal advice. No one should do that, but like,
But it's
but great action, right?
yeah,
And so,
yeah, wow.
and so he was like, all right, what do we do next? And I was like, I'll let you know. So I went back to my desk and I was like, all right, I got this thing under contract. Now I need money. I don't have any money. I had $1,000 in my savings account. That's all the money I had saved up. And so he was selling it to me for $116,000. I had $1,000. So I need $115,000 to buy this house. And I was like, who has money? I was like, banks have money. I'll just go to a bank and see if they'll give me a loan. And so I went on my lunch break to the bank that was closest to my office. That's the criteria I used to decide which bank I was going to use, was pure proximity to my office. And I walked into the bank with the contract in my hand, the paper contract. And I just happened to walk into a local community bank. I just happened to talk to the commercial loan officer because he happened to be in the lobby chit-chatting. And so I was like, hey, I'm looking for somebody that can help me with the purchase of this home. And he was like, he took the contract out of my hand and he looked at it and he was like, man, come to my office real quick. And we went back to his office and he was like typing and Googling. And he was like, hey, this house is worth a whole lot more than this. You know that, right? And I was like, yeah, that's why I want to buy it.
Yeah.
And he was like, dude, we would love to fund this. We would fund it on a commercial loan. We would even give you the money you need to fix it up. And so all you need to do is put 15% of the purchase price down. And so that's going to be about $15,000. Do you have $15,000? And I was like, yeah. I did not, but I wasn't going to tell him that.
Of
And
course.
so I was like, cool, awesome. How do we start the process? He gave me all the information, the things that I would need. And then I had to figure out how to find $15,000, $14,000. And so I was so excited, Kendall, right? Why was I excited? Why was I happy?
Because you were about to buy a house.
Yeah.
You're a real estate investor. You're about to get out of this.
When I walked into the bank, I needed $115,000.
Yeah.
And when I walked out of the bank, I only needed $14,000.
There you go.
I found a whole lot of money in a matter of an hour. Okay. So
Love
that's good news. And so what I did was bought that property. I went to my network of investors that I had been building relationships with at these meetups. And I was like, how do y'all find the money for these down payments? Like, I got this deal, I got the lender, I just need the down payment money. And like one of the investors like sat there and brainstormed all these ideas with me on how I could come up with the money. And none of them were going to work. But he was like, oh, you could borrow against your 401k. Did you know that? And I was like, no, how do you do that? And he was like, yeah, you could borrow against it because then you don't have to pay penalties or fees. It's your money. You take out a loan against your own 401k funds, and then you pay yourself back with interest, and your company will typically just take the payments automatically out of your paycheck, and they'll give you access to the money pretty quick. And I was like, what? He was like, yeah, you can borrow it. And then if you rent the property out, technically your tenants are going to pay back the loan for you. And I was like, that's crazy. That's it. That's what we should do. I just have to find a 401k. I don't have one. But my wife did. And so I went to my wife and said, hey, remember when I woke up in the morning and told you we were going to be real estate investors? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, we need to borrow $15,000 from your 401k so we can buy this rental property. And she said, okay. And we got the money in a week. We bought the house. And then when we bought the house, we had all this equity in it. And that same lender called me and he was like, hey, bud, we want to give you a line of credit on the equity in that home because you have so much equity in it. And then we want you to go out, find more deals like this and bring them to us so we can finance them. And so what you can do is then we'll finance, again, 85%, and we'll finance 100% of the renovation. And then you can borrow the 15% down payment from this line of credit that we're giving to you. And then after you fix that property up, if you flip it and sell it, then you pay back off the line of credit. Or after you fix that property up and you rent it out, then you can refinance that property and pull that cash back out and pay off the line of credit. And so my lender was explaining the Burr method to me
Yeah.
Before there was a cool acronym for it. Like he was schooling me
Wow.
on how to use other people's money to grow and scale your real estate business and how to execute a bird deal. Like I was getting this education from this guy. And so that's what I did. I took out that line of credit and I used it, and I probably bought 10 houses, rinsing and repeating that line of credit. But to get all the way back to the question you asked me, Kendall, after I closed on that house and that lender told me I could get access to that, we ended up getting access to 30 grand on a line of credit. And so I was sitting there after we closed on that line of credit, and I was like, man, and this was 90 days after my panic attack. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, 90 days ago, I was literally in tears and panicking because I didn't know how I was going to make enough money to afford the lifestyle my family needs. And 90 days later now, I'm sitting here and I know exactly how I'm going to do it. And I know that I've now found the thing that is going to take care of my family for the rest of my life. And it wasn't that hard. It wasn't that far away from where I was. I just didn't know any of this was possible. I didn't know this was something that I could do. And I was happy, Kendall, because of those things. But happiness wasn't the feeling I was feeling. The feeling I was feeling in that moment was an overwhelming sense of responsibility. I didn't think in that moment that God led me down this path, opened all these doors so that I could figure out how to become wealthy. That didn't make sense to me. What made sense to me was that he led me down this path and opened all these doors so that I could show other people that because there's got to be so many people who are in a worse financial position than I was in, who don't realize they are so close to being able to take care of their financial problems by doing something like this. And they just don't know it. And so I felt this responsibility because I'm like, okay, this isn't for me, obviously. This is obviously for me to share. Like I just felt like I was supposed to share it. And so in that moment, I didn't know what to do. I just said, because I wasn't a big social media person before this. Like I rarely ever, like I'm still never on Facebook. Like I don't go on Facebook. I have Instagram because that's where my business is, and LinkedIn. But I was just, and so I was like, I'll just put stuff on the internet because that's where people are. And then I'll just share my journey. I'll just take pictures and document what I'm doing and put it out there, and hopefully people see it and they'll learn something. Like I just didn't know how to share it. And this was before there was a million gurus, and this was pre 2020 when everybody was on the internet teaching stuff. This was 2017. Like it just wasn't that big of a thing. And so that's when I started my business page, and I started sharing pictures of before and afters and what I was doing and answering questions for people and helping people. And so that's when the personal brand started. It was never supposed to be this thing with I didn't do it because I wanted hundreds of thousands of followers. I did it because I felt a responsibility to do it, because I didn't feel like I found this just so that I could become wealthy. So that's how my brand started and why it started.
Yeah, I love that. I talk to a lot of different community leaders and thought leaders, and one of the commonalities that they have with your story is that a lot of times it was just like, I just want to share what I'm doing. Like I found this holy grail. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And now I just want to share that because it changed my life.
Yep.
So can you talk to us about, all right, you started putting this out, you started putting your stuff out there.
Yep.
What did the very beginning of that look like? And then how did you realize when it started to snowball?
Yeah, man, it looked terrible. I didn't know how to share, and I didn't know what to share. And I also didn't want people to think I was an expert. I was very concerned with misleading people, right? My goal wasn't to teach. And I still tell people this to this day. If you are new, because people that get into this space or they get into something new and they have all this fear around, should I put it out on social media? Because they don't want to lead somebody astray or make a mistake or let people see their mistakes. And the goal should always be, if you're new, share your journey, right? Like just share the steps that you're taking, right? And if you're experienced, then you teach, and you can teach people based on the experience that you have. And so if you get out of your own way and think, I'm not teaching anybody, I'm just sharing the things that I'm doing. As an example, I'm going down a path right now of opening my first residential assisted living home.
Oh,
Right.
right on. Nice.
And partnered with Isabella Garino's organization. And I am vlogging my entire process of what I'm going through and how I'm going from not knowing anything about this business to hopefully opening up the doors to my first facility one day. And so I put out a video every week. I have no idea what I'm doing, folks, but I put out a video every week showing people all the steps that I'm doing, right, wrong, or indifferent. So I'm sharing my journey because I'm not an expert in this. I don't know what to do. I'm just vlogging it as it's happening so that people can watch the progress and they can see when I have a success. They can see when I fail. I'm not teaching anybody anything. It's just sharing the journey. But the rest of my page is teaching people about real estate investing because I will teach based on the experience that I have. And so anybody can do those things.
Yeah, that is so good. And I'm definitely going to check out that vlog because I'm fascinated by that as well. So I'm so glad that you're doing that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, just to drill down even further, like you talked about how some people are maybe a little bit fearful of what if I fail? What if what I'm sharing fails?
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about, you're in the process right now of documenting this residential assisted living facility.
Yeah.
So has that come into your mind?
Oh,
What
yeah.
happens if it fails, and what am I going to do?
My next video is going to be, it could potentially be a big failure. I just found out that the state isn't going to allow the type of home that we want to do. So I'm going to have to make some sort of huge pivot, and I don't know what that is. But there's a lesson in that for somebody, right, who sees the process, right, that I've been going through. And yeah, no, absolutely. I think sharing your failures is exactly what you should do. Even if you're teaching, even if when you're either teaching or when you're sharing your journey, the failures are, I would say, more beneficial to your brand than the successes. Because failures show that you're honest and trustworthy. Failures show that you're human, and that makes you relatable. Because people can relate to somebody who falls on their face when they try something. It's hard to relate to the guy who gets out of his Ferrari and then walks onto his private jet and says, buy my course, right? Like, no, we're not living that life. But it's easier to relate to the guy that says, hey, I just tried to sell this house and I screwed up on X, Y, and Z, and now I'm going to make $20,000 less than I thought I was going to make. Somebody's going to see that and be like, oh, I get that. I understand that.
Yeah.
So in terms of building a brand, like the things that help you build a brand are trust and genuineness, and sharing a failure builds tons of trust and shows lots of being genuine, because there's so much disingenuous people on social media right now that when you're genuine and it shows, it stands out.
Yeah, for sure. And if your goal is to teach, right? Show me a better situation that you can teach than in a situation where you're failing, right?
What there's no one is batting 1,000 out here, y'all. I don't care who you're following. Exactly. they're getting kicked in the teeth like everybody else, man. If you're not seeing them get kicked in the teeth from time to time, then I'd advise you to look somewhere else, man.
Yeah, and that is such a good point, because you don't have the skill set to deal with being kicked in the teeth. Like, you're not going to make it. And so just being able to see someone else go through that process and say, okay, look, they just got kicked in the teeth and they made it. I can keep going. Yeah. That's so valuable. Yeah. I love that. So I want to pivot over to, you're talking about community. So I know that you have a mastermind, a real estate mastermind. You have a community where, can you tell us a little bit more about this? What was your vision for putting it together? What does that look like?
Yeah, man, it's the culmination of that story that I told you about, right? Like, I've been on this journey of how do I share this? How do I share this? And it started with the Instagram page, and then it turned into me wanting to help people and not price people out of the information. Because once you start sharing and you start building a brand, you start to realize at some point you will have a realization that you need to charge for the information that you have, but not because you need to make money. You realize that you need to charge for the information that you have, because if people don't pay for it, they don't take it serious and they don't put it into action. And what we who are truly passionate about sharing, what we really want is we want to see you get results. And when we give it all away for free, 95% of the people who absorb that free information do absolutely nothing with it. And go down
Amen,
this
man.
path of trying to like, how do I price it? I should speak for me. I went down this path of trying to figure out how do I price it so people take it seriously, but not price people out of access to the information. And so like when courses were a big thing, people were selling courses for $3, $4, $5, $6, $700, $1,000, $2,000. I was selling courses for 20, 30, $40, right? Like I just wanted someone to pay something to get access to it so that they could get it. But I didn't want the person who looks like me, who had to go to work with his arms, his legs, and his back all day, and not with his brain, who had to go work hard in manual labor all day and then come home and go, man, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to learn how to invest in real estate. I didn't want him to then have to go and pay me $400, $500, $600 or his whole paycheck or half of his paycheck or half of her paycheck to get access to that information. I just wanted it to be affordable, right? And so I would sell courses inexpensively, but I would still give information away for free on social media because I want people, look, I'm always going to give quality information away for free on social media. If you want to learn for free, I'll teach you for free on my Instagram. If you want more structured information, I'll give you a course for cheap that you can get in my curriculum. And then as you start to be more educated about how the education space works and how people's minds work when it comes to absorbing content, you start to realize that if you don't have a product or a service at a higher tier, the people who you've built trust with, who like, know, and trust you, who want to pay for the next level of information, are going to look to you to get it. And if you don't have it, they're still going to buy it. They're just going to buy it from somebody else who may not be as honest or trustworthy as you. And you start to realize that if you don't offer a product or service at that higher price point, then you're doing a percentage of your audience a disservice by not having that product or service. And so I said, okay, what's the next thing besides a course? And I was like, what if I did a coaching or a community? And that's where the community came from. And then we went through iterations of what do we want that to look like and how do we price that? And I still price mine so much cheaper than everybody else in the industry for the same reason that I price the courses so cheap. My community is very inexpensive in terms of what people are typically charging for access to a community or a mastermind. But that's the iteration I went through.
Yeah, that's so good. And I resonate so much with that because when I first got started in real estate, I wanted to tell the world. I was like, you guys, there's a hack out there that you're not doing, and let me share this with you. And then I had so many people, like colleagues, friends, family, that were like, Kendall, what are you doing? Show me what you're doing. And I can't tell you. I'm sure you've done the same thing.
Spend
hours.
Yeah.
Not that I minded spending the hours, because I was like, I'm doing things, like I'm sharing this amazing hack with you. And then come to find out, like, they do nothing with it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely nothing, because they just love the idea of, oh, I'm going to change. I'm going to do something. I feel like I'm doing it by learning, but then it stops. So I totally get where you're coming from with that payment, that investment that they're making is not to pay you. That's more for them. That's to put their own skin in the game, right?
Look, don't get me wrong, guys. I'm not saying there's not gurus out there that are just gouging people for money and not providing a good product or service. That absolutely exists. But I also want people to be aware that you've got to charge for information at some level if you want people to actually absorb it. There's such a delicate balance to me in how to give information at a fair and reasonable price and be very genuine about it.
Yeah, completely agree. And I love what you said about how you teach everything for free. Like, you put it all out there. But
it's all out there. Yeah.
More structured.
Almost everything that's in my curriculum that I teach in my community, I have taught on Instagram at some point for free. It's just unstructured.
Yep. Absolutely. Completely agree. And there is a lot of talk around this in the industry. But I think that it's so important to just make that distinction of, hey, like, any information that you really want to know is out there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for free. Absolutely. There's no secret to like building muscle and losing fat, but people still pay for trainers, but people still pay for nutritionists and that kind of thing, because different people need different type of structure, that type of thing. So completely right there with you. Now, talking about your community, I want to talk a little bit about what was the design intention around the experience that the people in your community
Yeah.
have? Have you thought about that?
That's a
About
great question.
what
Yeah.
do I want them to feel like? What is the experience like?
Mhm.
That type of thing.
Yeah, man. Like I said, we've gone through iterations. When it first started, my goal was to build a community of heart-driven investors. And what I mean by that is the way I've done real estate and the way I continue to do real estate and the way I teach people to do real estate is different than probably what most people teach. I'm very focused on the people whose lives we're impacting. In other words, I think when you're dealing with single family and small multifamily real estate, and specifically single and small multifamily real estate, people get into that space. Typically beginners get into that space because it's a more affordable track to start than going and buying like a 400 unit apartment building. And what happens is you go and you learn how to find deals, and then you go and you learn how to negotiate deals with sellers, and then you go and you learn how to monetize these deals, how to transact these deals. But what we forget, and what kind of falls to the wayside, is we really forget that these deals that we are buying, these transactions that we are taking on, these are people's homes. Like, sometimes it's the only wealth they've ever built. There's people in people's homes at the other end of our wealth building transactions. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't do real estate because of that. I'm saying that we should keep those people in mind, because if somebody's looking for an investor to buy their home at a discount, it's not because they just want to hook an investor up. There's some pain. There's a problem. There's something that they're facing that they need to sell at a discount in order to get out of that problem. And we as investors have an obligation to help that person. Sometimes helping that person means we buy their house and get them out of a tough situation. But sometimes we're going to walk into somebody's home and we'll know that we'll be able to help them without buying their home. And we should try to do that as well in ways that make sense. And again, I wanted to build a community of people who wanted to build wealth, but also wanted to do it because they want to take care of the people in their community, and because I wanted them to share the sentiment that I had, which was that I didn't get led down this path so that I could become wealthy. I got led down this path so that I could share this with people. So I want to help people who are going to help people. I want to help people build wealth who are going to take the information that they learn, the wealth and the time freedom that they gain, and then use it to improve the lives of the people around them, to improve their communities. And so that is still what we do and who we look for. And then I wanted to take those people and I wanted to educate them, and I wanted to meet with them, me personally, not random coaches. And then I'm never there, but like, I wanted to meet with them each week and teach them. And then I wanted to make sure that they were doing things in the right order at the right time and getting out of their own way. And how it started was I would have my community members come in. I would meet with them every week, typically on a Monday night, and I would go through and teach them some aspect of real estate investing, and then give them homework. And then they go do the homework, and the homework is them supposed to be taking the action. And then the next time we'd review the homework, and then I teach them something else. And that lasted maybe for a few months, because it was a lot of prep for me, having to figure out what lesson I was going to teach and what homework I was going to give. But what it did was it helped me to create modules. And so we shifted, after a few months, we shifted to a method where I created a curriculum and the goal, and we set the tone from day one. Like, I don't teach on my calls. That's not the highest and best use of my time for me or for you. The curriculum can teach you. So your job is to go through the curriculum. Your job is to write down your questions. Your job, the homework that I was giving is now homework in the modules. Your job is to do the homework and write down your questions from the homework, right? Your job is to write down questions when you hit roadblocks, because if you're truly doing the work we're teaching, you're going to have roadblocks. This isn't going to be easy. Write down your questions. On my calls, my job, what I want to do is I want to mentor you. So I want to answer your questions, and I want to make sure that you're doing the things you're supposed to be doing and not the things you just want to do that are comfortable. And so I can truly mentor people now. And so the education, they go through the modules, they write down their questions, And then they bring those questions to me, and I will mentor them and guide them each and every week. And so we still do that model. And then we've just continued to add more and more resources. So I do have other coaches now, but I didn't bring in other coaches so that I would teach less. I still teach I'm on a call every single week, but I also have coaches who do calls throughout the week. So we do 5 calls a week in my community. I'm on one of them.
Wow.
I don't want you to have an excuse. There's no excuse for you not to be successful. There's 5 calls a week. You have a private community where you can access and send me messages. You can talk to the coaches. I have a coach who specifically does one-on-one coaching with my students. I can't do the one-on-one coaching. That's all I would ever do.
Sure.
Is one-on-one coaching, but I wanted students to be able to have access to one-on-one coaching. So there's a coach who does one-on-ones with people, but that's the method we went to. So we have a curriculum, and then I mentor each and every week. But that's the model we've stuck to. And then we've been able to add more creative ways to add value throughout the process. So
that's incredible. Now, do you guys have a place where everyone hangs out? Is there like a forum or something like that?
Yeah, we use an app called Band. We've been using that for, 3-4 years now.
Awesome. I love that. And the goal of how you use Band for people to just stay connected, or do you engage, or what's the
both? So Band, for lack of a better term, operates and functions just like Facebook. I didn't want to have a learning curve for people. Like, I didn't want you to have to come in, learn real estate, and learn how to use this app that we're using.
Right.
But I also didn't want my community to be in Facebook, because there's so many communities in Facebook, like people just get lost in the sauce there. So I wanted it to be outside of Facebook. So that's why I chose Band, because there's no learning curve. Everybody knows how to use it without ever having used it before. But yes, I want people to congregate in there. I can go live in there. We can share pictures and photos and talk just like you would talk or interact on Facebook. And so, it's a full-on community that we operate in there. That's the way we wanted it to function.
I love that. And I also love how you were so intentional about the type of people you wanted in the community. Not just, I want as many people as I can get. You want the right.
It's not about money, man. It's about the right people, man.
That's right. That's right. So can you talk a little bit about how do you go about screening to make sure that, that you're allowing the right people in?
Yeah. How it started was I read Russell Brunson's books, right? .com Secrets, and all 3 of the books in that series. I can't remember what they're all called, but in one of those books, he has a 4-question close framework. And so it's essentially 4 questions he asks on his sales calls when he's trying to get people into his community. And so I took that framework and then I modified it to what I was looking for. And so in that framework, one of the first questions we ask is, why they want to go down this journey, because this is going to be a hard journey. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be hard, difficult, challenging, frustrating, upsetting, infuriating, annoying. And then after you go through all those feelings, maybe you'll get a deal closed, right? But that one deal, the win from that deal is going to be exponentially more beneficial to you, and you'll realize that it was worth going through all those things. But you're going to there's so many lows before there's a high.
Gosh,
and so what's driving you to push through those lows in order to reach the high? And I mix it up how I ask it, but essentially what I'm looking for in that answer is someone who speaks about something other than themselves. Because if I ask that question and someone says, man, I'm trying to make this money so that I can go on these vacations, right? That's probably not the guy for me. That's probably not the girl for me. But if I have to do this because I have a sick mother and I have to be able to afford the care. I have to do this because I need to show my children there's another way to build wealth. I have to do this because I have to take care of XYZ person, or I have to do this for this other person. Like, when I hear that answer, that's the people. That's my tribe. Right?
Yeah.
But when I hear they're like, man, no, I just need to get to this money, then that's not my people.
Yeah, that's so good on so many different levels. Yeah. It attracts the right people that you want into your community. It's part of who you are, your journey as well. And so the other thing that I really love about that, just as a side note, because I coach people on land and we have that community as well, but it is so important, I think, to share the expectation that it's not going to be like, oh, you sign up and then you get a deal and then it's all good. And then, because then they're going to be wondering like, hey, I've been here for 2 weeks. Where's my $1,000,000? Hold on. Doesn't work that way.
That's the difference when paying for coach. When we have that conversation on call sometimes too, where this is different. Like we're used to, I went to the store, I gave you the money, and you gave me the thing. So now I have the thing. It's not like that with coaching. You now are here, you give the money, and then the thing you get is information. You have to do something with that information to get the ultimate thing you're looking for, which is the result. Like it's not the normal transaction.
Absolutely. Like as a coach, we don't really like, and I say this all the time, when you hire a coach, like I have coaches for different businesses that I'm running, and I don't really use those coaches until like I get stuck. Like we don't even step in as a coach until you can't do it anymore. That doesn't mean the program's not working. It means, okay, now you've hit the natural roadblock. Now I can do my work.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So good. So good. So I want to jump over to podcasting because you have just a little bit of experience with podcasting yourself. Yes. So can you talk a little bit about your role as a podcaster and what that looked like when you first started to your evolution to now?
Oh man, it's such a learned skill. Yeah. And so it's a little different for me because it's not my podcast. I don't own it. I'm a host of it. And so I had to learn how to interview people. I had to learn how to always come with energy. Like people don't get it. Like they don't get that that's hard. Always be on and have the energy when there's no one to talk to, right? Like you just have to be on and energized. It was definitely a journey. When I started hosting for Bigger Pockets, I had never really hosted before. I had been a guest on hundreds of podcasts, but had never been a host. And so that was a process that I had to learn. And then there's just a lot of aspects to interviewing someone because every interview is not the same. Every person is different. There's some interviews where it's just what you and I are doing right now. We can just have a conversation and we're probably going to get to some good stuff because we're passionate about what we're doing. We're both energetic. We both but sometimes you get somebody on who has all this great information in their head and they're just like,
crickets.
And so you have to figure out how to pull it out of them. How do I get this person how do I not just get them to say valuable information, but how do I get them to feel good about saying that information? Like it's a learned skill, man.
Absolutely. Cannot agree with you more. So if someone's listening to this and they're like, listen, I'm interested in starting up a podcast. I want to do this. I want to have this interview kind of format. What are some tools and some tips that you can give them in terms of how they can develop?
The first thing I would tell you to do is to study other podcast interviewers. So that's different than just listening to podcasts and seeing what they're doing, but study them. Mm-hmm. Take notes about listen to Joe Rogan and listen to Alex Hermosi and listen to all these people and start to see, are they following some sort of a framework when they're asking questions? What types of questions are they asking? Are they asking open-ended questions? Are they asking closed-ended questions? Like, what are they try to understand what they're trying to accomplish in their interviews? When you start to study that, you'll learn a whole lot about how to talk to people and how to interview. And then I found this really cool tool. I wish I had it in front of me. It's in my office at home, but it's this deck of cards, but it's like a podcast interviewer's deck of cards. And it's literally got just tons of thought-provoking questions that you can ask if you find yourself in an interview or in a situation where there's dead time or and it's just, so sometimes I'll just flip those cards and flip through them, like not when I'm actually interviewing somebody, but just like in preparation, because I'm like, oh, that would be a great question to ask or come up, or maybe I can modify that question this way. But it's a really cool thing to just have next to your desk. That way you can pop it up and ask a question or pop it up and read through them and come up with different questions. But it's such a really cool tool. I can't remember the group, but it was a bunch of podcasters who put all these questions together.
Love that. Love that. That's really cool. That's really
cool tool. Yeah. Study podcasters. And then I would tell you, probably most people would disagree, but just start your podcast and start interviewing people, right? Like you don't have to be good at it on day one.
Yeah.
But the more you have conversations with people And the more you plan something out and then do the interview and then review it to see if the topics you wanted to cover actually got covered, the better you'll get. Just put it out there, man. You don't got to be good on day one. You can be good in year 2, 3, or 4. You don't got to be good in year 1, but the experience is going to get you there.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. So I wanted to chat with you about, as a podcaster, I'm sure you've had the experience where you're interviewing someone and it is just not going the way that you thought it would go, the way that you've planned. You've done all this preparation and it's just going sideways. So can you tell us a little bit about, like, how do you work through that and what's your approach to that?
Yeah, man, there's a couple of ways to think about this, because we've done it where we tried to pull information out of people and we just couldn't. So in those scenarios, we found a safe place to wrap the show, even if it was early. And we thanked them for coming on the show. And then we essentially told them that we would try to edit it together. And if it doesn't work, we would let them know. And so once the editors get it and we realize, okay, we can't produce this, and we would reach out to them and let them know we're not going to release the show. Like, it's your show. It's your brand. Don't feel obligated to publish something because you're worried that your guest will be upset if their episode doesn't get published. It's your brand that's going to suffer. Like, you have to find a respectable way to have that conversation with that guest about why you're not going to air that show, because you got to live with the reputation that it builds if you put that out there. And so we've definitely recorded shows that we just couldn't pull information out of people. And then we still tried to piece it together in post and it still didn't work. And so we said, we can't air this show. We've also had it where we had a guest one time where I'll speak for myself, but I pretty well know the other co-host as well, didn't agree. We just didn't like this person's views and takes on their real estate investing strategy, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it was not okay in my book, right? But we felt like there was value in having the conversation on air with him, asking pointed, difficult questions and getting them to speak on those things. And then at the end of the show, we changed the close to give our perspectives and wrap up and say, hey, X, Y, and Z was said. That is not how we feel. We feel this way because we feel like this is the right way to do this business. And so in those situations, like, we as media personalities, I feel like we have a responsibility to still put that information out there. Like, it would have been very easy for us to just say, hey, we're not going to air this episode because we don't like his take, right, on real estate investing. But there was value in putting that out there and showing people, hey, there are people like this doing things like this. We don't agree with this. This is the way we think it should be done, and still airing that episode. So there's several scenarios like you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that's so valuable, because I think one of the things, at least for my platform, is I love being able to showcase different perspectives, right? Like, that way people can see there are different ways of doing things and they're not all equal. And sometimes it is apples to apples, sometimes it's not. But it's really good to at least have the wherewithal of saying, you may run into this. Like, that's important. So you mentioned something about getting the information out of a particular guest that you were trying to get. Can you talk to us a little bit more about what is your approach to preparing to interview?
Yeah. So what happens now is there is a pre-interview. And so when a guest is booked, they will get on a Zoom with the producers in a pre-interview. And the producers will pull they'll just have a conversation about their story, and they'll ask pointed questions about their background. They'll pull all this information out. And then the producers will then create essentially a script. Like, they'll say, hey, these are some great things that we want to hit on. So they will build this like high level script. And then they will give that to us, the hosts, several days before the show so that we can read through and digest it. And they also give us the notes from the pre-interview so that we can read through and digest it and understand who this guest is, how they got to where they got to, and read about some of those stories that made them who they are, or help them get to where they are, so that in the interview, we can, if they aren't bringing up things that we feel like this was a valuable story, we need to talk about it, then we can ask pointed questions that would get them to talk about it. A lot of the times, if it goes well, you don't really have to do that. You can just have a free flowing conversation and people will bring up some of these things. But a lot of the times, people have these great points that they want to make, and then you get lost in the conversation and forget to bring them up. And so us having those pre-interviews plus the notes in front of us in the script to be able to know, oh, we need to get him to talk about, or we need to get her to talk about this particular story. If they're not getting there, then we can ask them a very pointed question about it to make sure that it gets covered. But all of that prep work happens before we even get anybody into an interview.
That's fantastic. That's a really cool sort of behind the scenes look at that. Really cool. Thank you for sharing that. So you also mentioned that you have to, like in the case where you did not want to put, or maybe the producers didn't want to put out a particular show for a guest, a particular interview, you mentioned how important it was to protect the brand. So can you talk a little bit more about what does that mean? What standard do you have? Like, how do you go about identifying that?
Yeah, that is the most personal of personal questions. Like, you have to understand who you are, who your audience is, and how you want to communicate to your audience and what you want to communicate to your audience. If you don't know those things, then you won't be able to make these kinds of judgment calls. That's something you have to figure out from day one. Who are you? Who is your audience? How do you want to communicate to your audience, and what do you want to communicate to your audience? And if you have those things, and when you are interviewing a guest, and so again, if I'm interviewing somebody and I don't agree with their point of view, I think that's great things to air. That's what you shouldn't censor those things. That's amazing. Where we might not want to air something is when the conversation just isn't engaging. It's not flowing. There's not valuable information being shared. It's not that the topic isn't helpful or that we disagree. Like, we could totally agree in whatever it is that you're doing. But if you can't communicate it in a way where people can understand it and where they will want to engage in listening to that episode, then you're not going to put a quality episode out there. And if you're at a point in your podcasting career where you're trying to produce quality episodes, then you may have to censor some of those things and pull some of those things down because they don't hit your standards. You have to know it takes time to get there. I'm not saying you're not going to produce bad episodes. You will produce bad episodes, right? But you should be monitoring your statistics to know what typical types of shows or topics are people listening all the way through a show, and what ones are they not, so that as you start to monitor your KPIs when you're having these interviews and things aren't going well, you can go, well, we know like people aren't going to listen to the show because we've got data to show us that. But yeah, it's more about, if you know what you want to produce and you feel like that conversation isn't producing the things you want it to produce, no matter how hard you try, then you may not put that episode out there because you want to protect your brand.
Yeah, that's so good. That is so good. And you mentioned something about you have to know your audience. I think that's probably a question that stumps a lot of people when they first start, because they don't know who they're creating for, whether it's for whether it's podcast or it's content creation or whatever.
Yeah.
They don't know who they're creating for. So do you have some tips on how you go about figuring out who is it that your audience is? Like, who are you creating for?
Yeah, I think before you go down a journey of creating a social media page or creating a podcast, you need to have a long, hard conversation with yourself about why you're doing it, because your why is going to determine your success. And what I mean by that is, this is hard. Like, it's tedious. Producing content consistently on social media, day in, day out, week in, week out, it's a grind. It's not fun. Sure, some content is fun, but doing it, I've produced 2 to 4 pieces of content every single day for 4 years.
Oh my God.
It's a lot.
Yeah. That is a full-time job on
And
top of a full-time job.
if you don't know why you're doing that, then you're going to quit. And if you're doing it for selfish reasons, you're going to quit. That's what I mean by have a long, hard conversation with yourself. Because if your goal is, I want to build up 500,000 followers, I want to get to 500,000 followers because you want that vanity number, you're going to burn out. And you're not going to get there when you want to because your content won't be genuine. Because the thing driving your content is views, clicks, and likes. And if the thing driving your content is views, clicks, and likes, then you'll want to produce content that gets views, clicks, and likes, regardless of if that content is genuine to who you are and who your audience is, because you'll be chasing the views, clicks, and likes. But if your goal is, I want to educate beginner investors on how to do this business the right way, right? Like, I don't want people getting caught up doing things that are going to cost them a bunch of money, right? Whatever that is. If that's your drive, then the content that you produce will be around that. It'll be what as helpful. Like for me, that's what I like. I have a social media manager. Like her job is to worry about views, clicks, and likes. And she gets mad at me because I'll produce something and I'm like, yeah, post that. And she was like, but that doesn't do well for us. I don't care if it does well for us. That's what people need to hear.
Yeah.
Post that. Just post that. That's, you'll get further doing that than you will chasing the views, clicks, and likes, because you'll quit. It's too much. Same thing with the podcasting. Like, you need to know who you're going to produce content for and why you're going to produce that content for those people. You got to be passionate about it, because podcasting is hard. That's long form content. Like we've been talking, we've been on here for an hour now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And this is just the hour conversation. That doesn't count the prep time you did before. It doesn't count the editing time that's going to come after. It doesn't count when you post it and you're measuring the metrics. Like, this is just part of it. And you got to do that multiple times a week, every week, all year long. Like, it's a grind. And so if you're going to do that, you got to know why you're talking. So I would say the way you can, or some of the ways you can think about or try to figure out who that is, ask your closest friends to pay attention to when you get passionate about what you're talking about. Because we all do this. We all get on a soapbox or talk about something and it lights us up. We get passionate about it.
Yeah.
But it's hard in the moment to think, oh, why am I passionate about that? So ask your friends, ask them, when I talk about real estate or when I talk about this, like, when do I get fired up? They may not know in the moment, but they'll catch you the next time. And pay attention to when you get fired up about something, when you get fired up about talking about something, when you're like, when you feel that adrenaline rush come when you're talking about something, there's a reason you're feeling that rush. And dig into that, why you feel the way you do and are passionate about that energy you've got around that topic, because that's probably what you'll want to talk about, or your why somewhere within there.
That is so good. That is so good. If business owners are listening to this and they say, surely there has to be some type of benefit to, maybe their passion is not necessarily teaching people. Maybe their passion is what their business is actually doing. So maybe it's like helping people get out of tough financial situations. Yeah. What advice would you give to those people in terms of how you create content around what it is that you're passionate about?
Yeah. Again, it's a learned process too. The best advice I can give you is don't overthink it. Don't overproduce it. Just produce it and put it out there, because you'll learn by putting it out there. You'll learn about the kind of content that you want to produce. You'll learn about the kind of content that people want to see from you. You'll learn about how to make your content better. Like, it's producing content and then watching your own content back. There's like different. Like watching it, you'll learn something. But I think a lot of the times, most people just get in their own way about producing content. There's just so much imposter syndrome around producing your content, because it's vulnerable, right? You're putting your information, your business out there, and it's vulnerable because now people can see it, evaluate it, talk about it. There's some vulnerability to it, but oftentimes we just overthink it. And bro, like, 9 times out of 10, I'll produce something and be like, that's dope. People are going to love this. 3 views, like my mom and my wife and my content manager look at it. Nobody else sees it. But I'll produce like some nonsense. Like the post that went the most viral for me last year was just a post where I was talking at a meetup, and I basically challenged the audience to do something and told them I didn't think they were going to do it. And that thing went crazy. I would have never thought that piece of content went crazy. Like, you're going to kill yourself trying to figure it out.
Yes.
But if you know who you want to teach and what you want to tell them, and you let that drive your content and you just do it consistently, something's going to hit. Something's going to hit, and it's going to help you get there. And it's going to hit because the information was valuable for people and because it was genuine, right? That's what's important.
Gosh, that's so good. That's so good. Henry, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to share your journey, so much expertise with us. Thank you for giving to us today. So what is it that you're looking for? How can we give back to you? What connections or resources are you looking for?
Yeah, great question. I would say the best way to help me is, if you haven't already, you can go to Amazon.com and grab a copy of my book, Real Estate Deal Maker. I wrote that book, released it this year, and it would mean the world to me if you would leave a review of it on Amazon. That would be super duper helpful for me. Very easy to do.
Fantastic. Definitely. I already have my copy. Congratulations on the new book launch. And again, thank you so much. This has just been so illuminating, and I just love hearing your views on this. Super valuable. So thank you for taking the time today.
Thank you for having me. It's been amazing. You're awesome. Thank you, sir.
All righty. Take care. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Hey there, brand fan. If these insider strategies on building influence and cultivating real community got your wheels turning, like and subscribe for more conversations that cut through the noise and get to what really works. And if you're ready to turn these insights into action, head over to onlybrandfans.com to unlock the next level. Until next time, build something they can't ignore.